We're honored to have Stephen Coughlin tonight. Stephen is someone who I've admired for a long time. I have followed him on YouTube, watched many hours of him, read his book tonight, and it's not an easy read, but it is a great read. He is an author, lawyer, was at the Pentagon as a reservist when 9/11 occurred, and they threw a bunch of books on his desk and says, "You're going to become the expert on Islam." He's a lawyer, so he at least knew how to read, for those lawyers out there, but also he knew how to look at the fundamentals, particularly of Sharia law as a lawyer, and that's what he began to look for. So he applied all that knowledge and began to become an expert. And his expertise was so important that the Joint Chiefs of Staff, White House, State Department, every law enforcement agency began to use his material that he had researched to begin to tell the story about what Islam was and the danger Islam was if you're not willing to even identify. And this is back years ago, many years ago. But in 2008, not under the Obama administration, but under the Bush administration, we had this gentleman here, Mr. Islam, senior advisor for the International Affairs and Deputy Security, that along with other influencers began to say, your material is too politically hot, and we don't want to hear it anymore. You've heard the stories about training material removed from that was previously 1 week before was okay, or a month before, or was getting accolades and awards for best material. Now it's suddenly too politically hot. What is defending our country? How can that be too politically hot? So, all those people booted him and others out of it, and the reality is his critics, many of them are connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. That's an influence operation the Soviets should have only wished they had, but they've done it, and Stephen's going to come here to put those pieces of the puzzle together for you tonight. So please give him a warm welcome tonight. Stephen all the way from Virginia after some travel challenges.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to have everybody show up here to attend this briefing. It's hard to put in words where we're at today. And I say this because I'm going to throw a couple terms out. One is facially neutral language. And if you're not a lawyer, you might not know what that means. Facially neutral language is to say something very extreme, but in really neutral terms. So that if you don't know what you're reading, you'll just read right past it. Go, oh, that's interesting. Make sense? And you'll find that a lot of the stuff that is right now about taking away your speech is phrased in facially neutral language. Whether it's the language of UN Resolution 1618 to make defamation of Islam a crime in every jurisdiction, or whether it's something called the Countering Violent Extremism Protocols, the CVE. How many people have ever heard of the CVE? Raise your hand. Okay. I want to argue with you that this is something very important because it's being implemented as our domestic policy today. It started a couple of years back. It's very important. Of course, I wrote this book and it basically says banned by the White House. I just want to make it clear, banned by the White House means the briefings I gave in the government were banned. And the book that this is based on is banned. And I'd just like to point out, this is not an easy read. This is the read for people who want to know the facts, the underlying doctrines, and the ability to use those doctrines and back them up. I put right here this little orange strip here to show you that there's over 150 pages of footnotes, and we had to shrink the book down. We had to shrink the appendix down to 0.8 font to get down to 150 pages. I say that because this is the book about proving the case. Why is that important? If you take a look at all the things going on, you will understand that their chief strategy isn't to counter us by a real debate, it is to silence us. It is to shut you down. It is to ridicule you. It is to make it look like you don't know what you're talking about. It's to say you're disqualified. All ad hominem attacks. Why? What this book is about is establishing as a matter of fact that we own the facts in this debate. We're not wrong on the facts. So much so that we can write whole books about who the Brotherhood is, what Islamic law says, and all that, not based on what we conjecture it to be, but the books they use when they say they're speaking about this. So I would like to start with a little vignette. I just missed a point here. Recently, I was in Vienna with Elizabeth at something called the Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe. You saw us in that picture, right?
Yeah.
The OSCE. That is a formal diplomatic mission that the United States is a formal member of. And in that mission, I got them to officially state, and we have it recorded, that saying something known to be true, that everybody acknowledges is true, can constitute hate speech.
Can constitute what?
Hate speech. So you're saying something that you could go to a court and prove is true will not overcome the accusation of being guilty of hate crime, even as that is the defense for slander in almost every jurisdiction in the United States and the West. Something that is true gets rid of that. How many people have noticed in the social media with Twitter and with Facebook, they're starting to put these rules down and creating it more and more difficult? Well, that's an example, and they tell you why they're restricting it. That's all stated in facially neutral language. But what it's actually doing is implementing the OIC's 10-year program of action, make Islam a defamation, make defamation of Islam a crime in every jurisdiction, that they're working its way through in UN Resolution 1618, so when it touches you, you don't see that. This is happening right now. We're in a situation right now that we're surrounded by the constrictor snake, and now it's just a process for them to start tightening it, and tightening it, and tightening it. They're no longer in the setup mode. They're in execution mode. So what I'd like to do before I go to the formal brief are a couple of things. And one is I set up this vignette. Dwight, if you want to come up. And what's your name?
Diana.
Diana, come on up. Sir, come on up.
I can't stand.
Oh, okay, well, I'll come over to you. Okay. And sir, come on up. This is a little vignette. It's something that, when it works great, and sometimes it doesn't work and it goes a little flat. But I want to throw a concept of Islamic law at you that you're told doesn't even exist. How many people have been told to your face there are no absolute rules of Islam when you discuss this? How many people have heard that? Okay. But how many people have heard it?
Oh, yeah, everybody.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to do is we're going to take this book right here. This is a book called Reliance of the Traveler. Okay? Reliance of the Traveler. And actually, before we get going, let's go to the very beginning of the book. Okay? We'll go next page. Okay. And in Arabic and English, just kind of show the page, and you'll see slides on this in a couple of minutes. You'll see that the Jordanians say this is an official translation of Islamic law. Turn the page, and you'll see that a guy named Al-Wani, who was a member of the, what's he a member of? The Fiqh Academy in Jeddah, am I correct?
That's correct.
Well, that would mean this speaks for the Saudi Arabians, does it not? But it also says he's the president of what?
The IT Institute, International Institute of Islamic Law. And also the Fiqh Council of North America.
The IIIT, the International Institute of Islamic Thought, a known Muslim Brotherhood front group in America. The Fiqh Council of North America, the Sharia law entity that is coordinated to the Islamic Society of North America, both known Muslim Brotherhood front groups. So we know on this thing in Arabic and English that not only do the Saudis approve of it, but the person signing on behalf of the Saudis, because it's the Fiqh Academy at Jeddah, also did it on behalf of the Muslim Brotherhood in America. Sound fair? Got the signature block. Finally, go to the next. There's one more page. Don't worry, we'll get to it. It's about what it says in Cairo. So what I want to do is have you read, go to number 1. What does it say?
Scholarly consensus, ijma, is the agreement of all the mujahideen, of the Muslims existing in one particular period after the Prophet's death, Allah bless him and give him peace, about a particular ruling regarding a matter or event. When the 4 necessary intervals of consensus exist, the ruling agreed upon is an authoritative part of sacred law that is obligatory to obey and not lawful to disobey. Nor can mujahids of a succeeding era, like now, make the thing an object of new ijtihad, because the ruling on it, verified by scholarly consensus, is an absolute legal ruling which does not admit of being contrived or contravened or annulled.
So we have this book of Islamic law that our coalition partners say they agree to, that the Brotherhood says they agree to, and there's this concept of ijma, scholarly consensus. That when all the imams at one time, about 1,000 years ago, got together and they all unanimously agreed on something, it became an absolute rule that cannot be contravened or annulled.
Ever.
Sound fair? Well, could you hold up that you're going to be doing this a lot. Here's a book on the law of Islamic, of ijma, scholarly consensus. Well, go to the next part. What is the next part? I'll hold it for you.
Apostasy from Islam, really. Leaving Islam is the ugliest form of unbelief, kufr, and the worst. When a person who has reached puberty and is sane apostatizes from Islam, he deserves to be killed.
Okay, well that seems pretty extreme. It's so extreme that, they're going to come up with criteria for what constitutes apostasy as a laundry list of examples. Could you go to that section?
Acts that entail leaving Islam. Among the things that entail apostasy from Islam are to deny any verse of the Quran or anything which by scholarly consensus, previously mentioned, belongs to it, or to add a verse that does not belong to it.
Okay, so they basically say that if you commit apostasy, you deserve to be killed. And one example of it is violating consensus. But it says again on section 14.
To deny the obligatory character of something which by the consensus of Muslims, the ijma, is part of Islam when it is well known as such, like the prayer, salat, or even...
That's good. Okay. So, do you see? There is something called ijma, called scholarly consensus. There's an absolute ruling that cannot be ever contradicted or annulled. If you as a Muslim violate it, you could be put to death for apostasy. Now, how many people think that being put to death for a concept means it's an absolute rule? You're going to be dead. Do you think they could make an absolute rule about something that had no definition? Or that people didn't understand it? So let's go to the next section. What section are you looking at right now?
Jihad. Jihad means to war against non-Muslims and is etymologically derived from the word mujahadah, signifying warfare to establish the religion, and it is the lesser jihad.
Now just jump down.
The scriptural basis for jihad prior to scholarly consensus.
Okay, so they're going to give you a couple quotes from the Quran, because that was the authority prior to there being scholarly consensus on the law of jihad. And then it goes on and gives a couple verses from the Quran, right?
That's correct.
Anybody who wants to think I'm making this up or I'm cutting loose will have these books here. So there is scholarly consensus, according to this book on jihad, that our coalition partner says is Islamic law, that the Muslim Brotherhood, who has the Islamic Society Mosque here, agree with, because they published this book of Islamic law in English. Starting to see why I'm doing this? So what's the next section?
Lying. When it is possible to achieve such an aim by lying, but not by telling the truth, it is permissible to lie if attaining the goal is permissible.
That's right.
And obligatory to lie if the goal is obligatory.
Now I want to make something really clear. I am making no universal comments about what every Muslim thinks or doesn't think. I've been married to my wife for over 30 years. I don't know what she thinks half the time. We're not making that argument. What I'm making the argument is it's the duty of the intelligence officer or law enforcement or national security agent to know the enemy and to know his doctrine. Sound fair? And we know that the enemy we fight in war on terror says they fight jihad according to and in furtherance of Islamic law. Right? So, and we have a book, this book of Islamic law right here, that unconditionally states everything Al-Qaeda says when they say that's what it is, that our coalition partners are all on board with, that the Brotherhood domestically says they're with, when your priest, minister, or rabbi goes to an interfaith outreach meeting with them. What do you think about that? So, we're going to now go to, I think, part. What part?
Part number 10.
Okay, let me just do this because you're standing. Here's another book. It's written by a distinguished juriscriber by Ibn Rushd. This book was written in 1305. Okay, the year 1305. Ibn Rushd is more commonly known in the West as Averroes because he was a great philosopher of the time. So, what do you see in section 7? What is it?
The Book of Jihad.
The Book of Jihad, right here. See, you can't see that it says the Book of Jihad. How many pages is the Book of Jihad? About 30.
Probably about 30.
About 30 pages. Go to part 7 here. Okay, could you read? We're in the section on jihad. Ready?
Why wage war? The Muslim jurists agreed that the purpose of fighting the people of the book, excluding the Qurayshite people of the book in this Christian Arab, is one of the two things. It's either for the conversion of Islam or the payment of jihad.
Jizya. So, Jizya. So, it starts off with why wage war? The Muslim jurists agreed. That's scholarly consensus, do you see? And this Islamic book of Sharia is saying that what they said, why wage war? The Muslim jurists agreed that the purpose of fighting the people of the book is either for their conversion to Islam or payment of the jizya, the submission tax. This was in Spain. Okay, so let's go. I think we're now, who wrote this book? Who was the people who oversaw its translation and distribution in English? We have
Sheikh Mohammed bin Hamad al-Tahani, chairman.
Well, we have to know what that HE stands for, and that stands for?
I don't know.
His Excellency. As a matter of fact, thank you. When we look at this book, we see that the people who just put this book out are His Eminence, the Sheikh of Al-Azhar, the most authoritative school of Islamic thinking in the world. We have the director of the Islamic Educational ... It's an OIC entity. And let me just say, His Excellency, the Minister of Education for Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, the Secretary General of the Muslim World Association, and all the other people on this list. Which means that all our coalition partners in the war on terror also believe that this is the definition of jihad. When they turn around and tell you it doesn't mean that. One more thing. This is the Board of Trustees. This is the Board of Trustees. But the board, it also has Professor Yusuf al-Qawadari, the senior jurist of the Muslim Brotherhood. So here we have another book of Islamic law where national state entities approved it, that the Brotherhood approved it. I don't have to prove what true Islam is. I just have to prove what the people we're fighting think it is, and we're proving it. Here's the downside. We're also proving the people who say they're our friends and tell us this is not true Islam, they're telling us the same thing. How many people think that's interesting? Now, let's go to another book. This is the book Sahih al-Bukhari. Bukhari was the #1 hadith scholar in Islam. Do you want to hold it? Or do you want to?
Could you explain to them what hadith?
Hadith?
Hadith is?
Hadith are the sayings or acts of the Prophet Muhammad. And if a rule comes out of hadith, it becomes the sunnah of the hadith, from which you get Sunni Islam. And they are understood to have legal weight according to how they're adjudicated in Islamic law. But, now this is Sahih Bukhari. That's volume 4 of a 10-volume translated set. I've got the whole thing. And we're going to take a look at what it says in Bukhari. Starting with the front cover, which is actually the back cover.
All Muslim scholars are agreed that Sahih al-Bukhari is the most authentic and reliable book after the Book of Allah. That is the Quran.
So, what you have is they're saying all the scholars agree, which means there's ijma, scholarly consensus that says his writings are second only to the Quran in authority. Make sense? And all the scholars agree. Book 4 is the book that has writings about, and I'll hold this for you, Jihad. Could you open it up to Jihad? He had it strategically placed. How many pages about are there on the sayings of the Prophet on Jihad? All the way to there.
Approximately 150.
Pages. Pages. Now, could you read what it says? We'll start with just the first line, the opening line. There's a footnote just here, 56. It says the Book of Jihad Fighting. We'll just read the first couple lines of the introduction. So go ahead.
Number 1 chapter, the superiority of jihad and the statement of Allah. Verily, Allah has purchased of the believers their lives and their properties for the price that there shall be paradise. They fight in Allah's cause, so they kill others and are killed.
So, thank you. In this section of the Hadith that says the Book of Jihad, fighting for Allah's cause, how many people think that's really complicated? Steve, it's all so complicated. It's really complicated. It has a footnote there, footnote number 1. Could you just read the first couple lines of footnote number 1?
Al-Jihad, holy fighting in Allah's cause, with full force of numbers and weaponry, is given the most importance in Islam, and one of its pillars on which it, that is Islam, stands.
Thank you. We could read more. It goes into the NC-17 stage principle. But there's scholarly consensus that Bukhari is number 1 after the Quran. He says jihad is fighting, and it is the number one priority. And this is also authoritatively translated by an Islamic publishing house. Finally, we have Al-Hidayah, and we're going to be quick here. And could you go to the section in the back called the CR? And what does it say?
Relations with non-Muslims.
And what's the first part of it?
The legal status of jihad and the rules of warfare.
And about how many pages are there in this section?
56.
56 pages. So here we are. Could you look, the Islamic world divided, in Islamic law the world is divided up into 2 principal camps. The Dar al-Islam, the world of peace and Islam, and the Dar al-Harb, the world of warfare and the world of the enemy. We are in the Dar al-Harb. Could you go to the glossary in the back and look up the word Harbi? Because if you're from the Dar al-Harb, you are Harbi. What does it say?
Oh, all right. Siege.
You don't know Harbi right there?
Oh, I'm sorry. Enemy.
Enemy. It also says in the other book. Thank you. So why did I teach this? Why did I want to go through this little vignette? Because so let's give everybody a little quick hand here. Why did I do that? Because and these books are here. I got books that were published by Islamic publishing houses, half of them from the Middle East. All of them show that they're authoritative and they're recognized by not just governing entities in the Muslim world, but also by the Brotherhood here. We were reading the second most authoritative hadith, Bukhari, where the whole section on jihad starts with the fact that there's consensus on this and jihad is warfare.
Worldwide.
So what you know is that the idea there are no absolute rules in Islam is wrong. It is wrong as a matter of fact. You are always wrong when you say that. Why? We just showed you that if you understand what it means when they say all the scholars agree, or there is no disagreement among the scholars, or the mujahids are in agreement, or language like that, that they're asserting the absolute rule of scholarly consensus, ijma, and we went so far as to show that it's apostasy to violate it, which means you could be put to death. All that, using only their sources, I could just hand it out to people and they could see it. Yes, sir?
Do they deny their own writings? And how do they deny it?
Well, this is the thing. This is why they're trying to pass laws to forbid you from talking about it. Because this is not hard. Everything that was read here, there are a couple hard words here and people stumbled over them. I mean, that goes, reading these Arabic terms could be hard. But they were all clear, were they not? Clear like you could teach a 5th grader. Were they not?
Yeah.
Those who commit apostasy deserve to be killed. Well, that's what I read in Islamic law. But my friend at the Brotherhood, who's trying to tell me it's different, or the guy doing interfaith with your priest, minister, or rabbi, he will tell him, I'm not kidding, it's all so complicated. I know that when you and non-Muslim read that the people who commit apostasy deserve to be killed, that you not unreasonably take that to mean they deserve to be killed. But it's all complicated. If you understood the way we understood it, you'd understand. And that's bad enough. But you know what happens? You see all the interfaith ministers, priests, and rabbis go, yeah, that works for me. And you'll see that minister, I know ministers it's happened to. You will see that priest, I know priests it's happened to. You will see that rabbi, I know rabbis this has happened to, turn around and attack members from their synagogue or church if they dare to tell you that. Even when you bring the book in. Because they're so invested in the interfaith movement. Which we're not going to talk about tonight, but I have a really cool brief on it. So, if you're ever interested, because it is important, it's important to understand how to understand that the Brotherhood targeted the interfaith movement 30 years ago, and they've turned the institutional elements of almost every major denomination. So, this is just going to be a primer. We're going to talk about the Brotherhood, and if we have time, I hope we have time, we're going to end with the CVE. Because the CVE is the kill mechanism in the war on terror. They don't plan on winning the war by having a jihadi come and blow you up, although that could happen. They plan to win the war by having your government leaders arrest you for saying something that's a hate crime, even though you can show it to be true if you read right out of the books they publish that you bought in their stores that they teach. How's that? Yes, ma'am.
Are you going to have a Q&A at the end?
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
So, does that make sense? So, I started showing these two videos a long time ago. And I have to apologize for people who've seen it before, but they're impactful. When I first started briefing in the Pentagon, it would be in the classic horseshoe with the general in the middle, and then the colonels, and then the lieutenant colonels, the majors. And what would happen is about a third of the way into the brief, the general, wanting to show that he was on top of it, would say something that was just crazy. Just not right. And I would have to say, now, do I just get past these slides 10 minutes from now, or do I show that what he said was staggeringly ignorant in front of his staff? And you lose, and you lose. You see that? So I really had to think about how could I get these people to shut up about things that they know. I want you to listen to what I'm saying. That they know they don't know what they're talking about. Because if you want to have an opinion on Islam, and you haven't read this, you don't know what you're talking about. You're basically making your opinions on which American lives have been lost, on hearsay, on the unsupported statements of groups like the Brotherhood who come in for outreach, where all you had to do was literally go to the bookstore of the mosque of the imam you were visiting and buy this book. For the generals, you could buy the 6th grade primer for the kids and read it. And I'm telling you, I have those books, and they're as clear as they need to be. So, I found this spoof piece on the Fox News half-hour news program, which was supposed to be funny. And so, I would play it. And before I started, I would say, listen, I'm going to watch all of you, and all of you are going to laugh. And they say, oh, okay. And then you could watch them try not to laugh. But here's the point. If you laugh, you get it. And if you get it, you're guilty. Okay? And so this is the piece I showed.
6 men have just been charged with conspiracy to murder in connection with a plot to blow up buses and subway cars in London during the summer of 2005.
The 6 would-be suicide bombers charged are Mukhtar Saeed Ibrahim, Ramzi Mohammed, Yassin Omar, Mansour Saidu, Adel Yahya, and Hussein Azman.
Since their capture, the big question for Scotland Yard has been, what exactly is it that links these 6 individuals? What common denominator motivated this seemingly random group of young men?
It is puzzling, isn't it? Yeah, but here to help us untangle this mystery, please welcome international terrorism expert Dr. Franklin Robertson. Welcome, Doctor. I gotta tell you, you know what this case reminds me of, Doc? A more successful bombing attack in London during July of 2005.
Do you mean the suicide bombings carried out by Mohammed Sadiq Khan, Shazia Tanvir, Abdullah Shazid Jamal, and Hazbib Hussein, Kurt?
I believe that was it, yes. Now, what are the 2 cases kind of similar?
Similar. Wait.
I don't know. Maybe both involve buses, subways, suicide bombers?
You know, Kurt, it's tempting to try to concoct these conspiracy theories to explain these incidents, but most of those just don't work.
But, I mean, it could be a conspiracy, couldn't it? I mean, like last August when 10 people were arrested in London for trying to blow up those U.S. bomb plants.
من ما Abdullah Ali Tanvir Hussein Omar Islam Marhaba Ibn Sa'ali Sawar Adam Katibi perhaps Ivan Wahid Zaman Sa'ali and Moran Hussein.
Sounds like that, yeah. But Doctor, you can't tell me those guys didn't have anything in common, I mean, besides the desire to blow things up.
If you say so, Kurt, what might that be?
Okay, well, let's see. Were they all young males?
No, one was a woman.
All right, that's a dead end. Okay, well, how about this? Were they all from the same hometown?
No, we were all from different London suburbs, not so easy, is it?
Did any of them have eating disorders? Those can make you crazy.
Okay, yeah, right. Now, funny you should ask that because we just learned that none of them would eat pork. Still don't know what that means yet.
Okay, well, how about this? Were they all going by their original names?
No, Kurt Omar Islam was born Brian Young, but he changed his name after he converted.
Converted? To what?
Islam.
Oh, geez, another dead end.
Everybody knows Islam is a religion of peace.
Well, we spent thousands of hours studying this, and frankly, we're stumped.
Well, you're the expert, and I guess if there were something that like Mukhtar Saeed Ibrahim, Ramzi Mohammed, Yassin Omar, Mansour Saidu, Adel Yahya, Hussein Azman.
Or for that matter, Mohammed Sadiq Khan, Shazia Tanvir, Abdullah Shazid Jamal, and Hazbib Hussein.
Yeah, if they had anything weighing them, you would have discovered it by now.
That's right.
Right.
So in the meantime, why don't you just let the detective work be done by detectives?
You got it. Thanks for joining us today.
Okay, so what you're seeing here is the counterterror expert is a soft science professor, right? He's a political science guy or a social anthropologist or a psychologist, group dynamic psychologist. And every one of them creates an academic model on which they decide they're going to translate reality in terms of these models that are completely abstract. But what happens is the actual events never break through. They can't see the events which are facts because they put them through the filter of these models that they get PhDs in. And then what happens is they create language in their PhDs that you basically have to get the master's degree to be able to converse. So all of a sudden you're just a bunch of ignorant fools talking about Islam as if just because they go and say they're going to kill people, and just because they do doesn't mean that's what it is. And if you took your master's in our terrorism class where you use the language of countering violent extremism and violent extremists, you too will be able to have this language. Do you see it locks you, the average citizen, out of the discussion? But it also makes the discussion not factual. It makes it theoretical. It makes it academic. How many times have we had professors fight wars and win? Well, you could argue that some professors became officers and then fought, but they were officers and they fought. Like Colonel, then General Chamberlain at Little Round Top in Gettysburg. But my point here is, because he thinks of this in intellectual terms as an academic pursuit based on a model of behavior, the reality of who these people are doesn't break through, and he doesn't even recognize that the very explanation of who they say they are defines what's going on. Now, as bad as this is, everybody laughs because they see how ridiculous it is, not least because they see it every day. You go back to Fox News when they had San Bernardino, and half the discussion, well, would you call him an enabler? Would you call him a violent extremist? Or would you say he is the enactor of a violent extremist? All because they're trying to conform to a speech, a narrative that exists to pretend you're talking about San Bernardino and what happened without talking about the facts of San Bernardino. You see that? You're actually talking about nothing. And so long as you do that, you can get a job in the national security community or on a news station. But the minute you actually define them based on who they said they were, when they said they acted, when they said they were acting, you will be fired. Okay? So, you think this is just a joke because when I first showed that, it was funny. But you know, there was this congressman who stuck me and Pat Poole, a person I work with, he literally took us and locked us in the Congressional, the House Judiciary Law Library. Actually locked us in there and would go to the floor and pull us in, we would be there, and pull in members of Congress to brief them. And we would brief them. He'd literally grab, come into the Judiciary Library, Law Library, we would do that. One of them was Congressman Lundgren. And it was a contentious discussion because we're briefing on stuff we're telling you today. He said, well, you know, it can't be that, blah, blah. So, lo and behold, 10 days later, he is asking questions of an Assistant Secretary of Defense. Congressman Lundgren, here you're going to see, is interrogating the Assistant Secretary of Defense in an Article 1 of the Constitution function, Article 1 of the Constitution, the powers of Congress, where he is in Congress, exercising his Article 1 authority in oversight against the Assistant Secretary of the Defense.
I recognize the former Attorney General of the State of California, Chairman of the Cybersecurity Subcommittee, Mr. Lundgren.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me just say unequivocally my great support for those who are serving in the military today, and for those of you who are appearing on this panel. Secretary Stockton, are we at war with violent Islamist extremism?
No.
No, sir. We are at war with Al-Qaeda.
Okay, I understand that. My question is violent Islamist extremism at war with us?
No, sir. We are being attacked by Al-Qaeda and its allies.
Is Al-Qaeda, can it be described as being an exponent of violent Islamist extremism?
The Al-Qaeda are murderers with
No,
an ideological
agenda.
agenda.
That wasn't my question. My question was, is Al-Qaeda acting out violent Islamist extremism?
Al-Qaeda is a violent organization dedicated to overthrowing the values that we intend to advance.
Yes or no?
Can I hear the question again?
Look at that.
I'll make it as clear as I can. We are not at war with Islam.
I didn't
And
ask
it
that.
is
I
not-
did not ask that, sir. I asked whether we're at war with violent Islamist extremism. That's my question.
No, we're at war with Al-Qaeda and its allies.
Al-Qaeda, how does Al-Qaeda define itself? Are they dedicated to violent Islamist extremism?
Al-Qaeda would love to convince Muslims around the world that the United States is at war with Islam. That's a fine propaganda tool, and I'm not going to aid in the effort to advance their propaganda.
Is there a difference between Islam and violent Islamist extremism?
Sir, with great respect, I don't believe it's helpful to frame our adversary as Islamic with any set of qualifiers that we might add. Because we are not at war with Islam.
I understand that. I never said we were at war with Islam. One of the questions we're trying to deal with is the radicalization of Islam, is the radicalization of Islamic youth. And if we can't distinguish between violent Islamist extremism and Islam, then all this stuff about behavioral indicators doesn't mean anything. Well, let me ask you this question. Is it a behavioral indicator to put on your card that you're a soldier of Allah?
a behavioral indicator that you have a copy of Inspire magazine on your desk.
That's not my question. My question is it a behavioral indicator to put on your card that you were a soldier of Allah as Major Hassan did?
We have behavioral indicators now that enable our personnel, our supervisors, to focus on detecting indicators of violent extremism that reflect the lessons learned from Fort Hood.
Okay, is that a lesson learned? That you put soldier of Allah on your card, that you ought to follow up and investigate that?
Major Hassan did.
We're training our supervisors to follow up on appropriate indicators and exercise the leadership they need in order to provide for effective reporting and information.
Do you agree with the statement to someone representing the Department of Defense on the weekend after the shooting that it would be a greater tragedy to lose our program of diversity than what occurred?
Well, let me go back to something Chairman King said. I was trained up by Senator Moynihan. There was nobody less politically correct than Senator Moynihan. I follow the truth wherever it takes me, and I strongly support the programs of the Department of Defense that focus on Al-Qaeda and behavioral indicators. This is not about political correctness. This is about competing our adversaries.
Sir, I would disagree with you that it may not be about political correctness. We are here talking about the fact that we now have to have behavioral indicators. I agree with that. But my question is, if someone gives inflammatory remarks, as did Major Hassan, in an open setting, if he has on his card that he was a soldier of Allah, it seems to me to be beyond common sense to think those are not behavioral indicators. So my question is, if I'm a member of the military today, and I see those two events or those two circumstances, would it be appropriate for me to report those as behavioral indicators? Now that's not a question of whether or not you're being politically correct, sir. I'm asking to answer that specific question. If I'm a soldier and ask you that question, what do you tell me?
Inflammatory rhetoric of the sort associated with Major Hassan that needs to be reported, and our officers are trained up now to report on that behavior.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Watch this.
Mr. Stubble,
Ladies and gentlemen, his time has expired.
Watch. I am convinced he was saying those guys were right when we briefed him. Now, if you are somebody who writes fact-based analysis of Al-Qaeda, and it's going to him, is he going to let that move up?
No.
So you should have no problem with the fact that intelligence has been falsified for a very long time.
Absolutely.
Because if you're not allowed to say that Al-Qaeda fights according to Islamic law to implement Sharia law, which is what they say, then you're not reporting what their explicitly stated threat doctrine is. And therefore, I don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about behavioral indicators in the real world killing people today. And I will tell you something. In 2002, Al-Qaeda put out a book we call Al-Qaeda 2.0. I forget the name of it. And someone was in prison with, I can't remember his name now. An Al-Qaeda operative in 2002. And in 2005, he's published an article in Der Spiegel magazine, a German magazine, and he talked about Al-Qaeda's timelines. And what did he say? A book written in 2002, published in Der Spiegel after being translated in 2005. In 2010, they were going to bring down the Arab states and establish Islamic states. Did you not see what we called the Arab Spring? Bringing them down? Every place we brought them down, did we not see Al-Qaeda and ISIS move in? I was briefing on Capitol Hill, how is it possible that we changed sides in the war on terror and nobody seemed to know? And it's on record that I said this in late 2010. But Al-Qaeda said that they were going to do that in 2002. They were right on schedule. They said starting in 2013 they were going to stand up the Islamic State and declare the caliphate. Did ISIS stand up? ISIS is just a variant of Al-Qaeda. Okay? Don't get yourself all concerned about this. Did they stand up the caliphate? Yes. Did they call it the Islamic State? I was in an international function in Vienna, we referenced it earlier, the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and we were being told at an official diplomatic function that for us to call the Islamic State could constitute hate speech. And someone pointed out that, wait a second, the Islamic State calls itself the Islamic State. They said, yes, that might be true, but if you use that word, you're maintaining a stereotype. Which is what gave rise to the question, are you saying something known to be true could constitute hate speech? They said, yes, they did. We have it recorded, okay? And an official function. 2 months later, Jay Johnson of the DHS came out and said he won't use that language. You had some other people do this. So there's nothing about this. I put this up here because I tell people, I joke, I'm a Viking fan. They're building their stadium. They're not here. Yay. Because I'm from Minnesota. Because remember, they were bringing the Vikings down here? That's just a little joke. So
That's not funny.
it is to me.
Not here.
So does anybody see pictures like this about what's going on in Europe?
No.
Anybody see that when some men are starting to stand up to defend their wives and daughters, you see the German government, and I think a couple other places say, if you go after them, we'll go after you? Do you know, if you think we live in a free press, you should try to go and find what's going on in Europe that is being filtered out by Google coming over here, being filtered out by Facebook, being filtered out by YouTube. YouTube. And Google. You should look at this. Yes, sir?
AOL is refusing to send my emails to people because they disagree with the subject matter. They say unable to deliver. That's AOL doing the same thing.
How many people think that should be acted on immediately? Is this not a control of your speech? If I can prove that they're doing that by government pressure, isn't that acting under color of authority, a direct violation of your First Amendment?
Yes.
That's how you're being silenced, and nobody knows it's happening. Okay? So, open or die. So why do I teach this? And I'm going to blast through these slides. I want to make up a little time. We went for a while. But all of us were in senior positions of the U.S. Intelligence Committee and should have been aware of this information. We were not until I briefed them and a couple other people. It was the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, General Boykin, the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, Joe Schmitz, the Director of the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, General Soyster, and the Director of the CIA, Woolsey. They all wrote this letter saying, before we briefed them, they didn't know this. Why am I telling you this? Because a lot of people don't know this. And you'll find out that the higher up you go in the counterterror world.
Were they criticizing their own staff for not telling them? Or?
Well, they actually do criticize their own staff for not telling them, and then they fire them if they do.
Well,
But we're going to keep moving here, okay? So, but the point of it is on the inside, we established our credibility a long time ago. And of course, there's this book right here, Catastrophic Failure, I just showed you. They took the appendix, they took one of the indexes out, Bridge to Nowhere, the Catholic Church's study on what they're doing in the interfaith movement. And I have to be really, really clear here. The Catholic Church isn't doing anything that the lead Jewish groups and the lead evangelical groups and the lead Baptist are doing as well. Okay? We can show every one of them are doing this if we can put them in the interfaith movement. We can go get the State Department document and say, they'll run down the list. Why does the Catholic Church catch it so badly? Because Catholic Charities is so big that they can move mountains. And, well, I'll stop there. But the point of it is, this is an example of what's going on in the interfaith movement that I singled out what's going on in the Catholic Church. I can replicate this in every major denomination. So, my thesis was declassified, it's coming out at will. I like to give a couple quotes from it. In the war on terror, it is the non-kinetic, non-killing phase of jihad that represents the greatest long-term challenge for the United States. There is reason to know the Islamic concept of submission are working their influence against the West. A currently operating manifestation of submission may be a current approach that traps senior leaders and decision makers in a process that keeps them from gaining traction against the enemy in the war on terror. In this, submission does not reflect a subjective state of mind, but rather an objective commitment to processes incapable of generating success against an openly declared enemy. I wrote that as a thesis in 2007. Does anybody think we're seeing that all over the place? The other quote, the cost of not understanding the enemy is high and getting higher every day. It will increasingly be measured by news stories that narrow in on senior leaders' inability to answer basic questions about the nature of the enemy. It will also manifest itself in official responses to terrorist attacks that become progressively less reality-based. Are we there? They told me they released it. It's declassified, so I'm putting it out in the book. I'm not saying this to sell my book as a thesis. I'm just showing that people have been following this. And we're exactly where Intel analyst who wrote about this, this is prestigious at National Defense Intelligence College. It's a big thing to get admitted. So I just like to point out that it's there. We have our 501. I have a couple papers out that started to follow up on it. We're right now in the same position we were back in 2005. I was mobilized. My wife was in the Pentagon, by the way, when it got hit. She was there. Okay? And I was mobilized in September 2001. I was on station in October 2001. And I demobilized in 2004. I was brought on the Joint Chiefs of Staff Targeting Cell in the Intelligence Directorate. And when I demobilized, I wrote a series of things saying why I thought things were really not working well. And I have to point out, this was the Bush administration. I ran into the senior civilian intelligence officer on the Joint Staff in the Metro in downtown DC. He goes up to me a year later, he goes, "You were right." And I'm looking at this guy because you change jobs, you go back to corporate world, and you're like, who is this guy? Now, oh yeah, you're the guy from the Joint. You were one of my bosses. You were right. And I said, what are you talking about? You left and you wrote these 5 things that would happen because we refused to look at the situation. They all came to us, and of course they did. I said, well, could you please come in and brief the generals on the Intelligence Directorate, the generals and admirals? And I said, yeah, I will do it, but I'm not going to do it as a reserve officer in any capacity. I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm going to really tell you what I think. So we really want that. Now, you should know that when I demobilized in 2004, every email I sent inside the Pentagon ended with Fallujah delenda est. Now, for people who know Roman history, there was a man named Cato the Elder who every time he gave a Senate speech, he would end the speech with Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. And I would end my emails inside that system saying, Fallujah delenda est. Because they threw down, and if this is a war, they have to be taken down. And of course we did. But, so I gave the presentation to the generals, and they came in, and it came down to 2 questions that I was really sure they would throw me out. Can overdependence on moderates to explain non-Western motivations and beliefs lead us to overly depend on them for the decisions we make? Is there a point where the outsourcing of our understanding of events leads to our outsourcing of the decision-making associated with them? At the point at which you bring in subject matter experts to explain what you don't know about the nature of the enemy, isn't he actually the guy making the decisions? Think about this. So the very point at which they knew they didn't know it, decided not to look for it, but brought people in, those people giving that information were actually driving the war. Does that sound fair? I mean, I could tell you as a manager or some in the corporate world, a parent, a lawyer, that if I control all your inputs to a decision, I'm going to pretty much control your decision on it. We're still there. We're still there. Are we not hearing people saying we have to bring moderate Muslims in to help us understand the war? Let me make something very clear here. I have nothing against bringing Muslims in to help make decisions. I have something against bringing people in as a condition for us to create national policy. That the decision to support and defend the Constitution is based on an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies. And those who are our friends will join that. Those who aren't, they're out. Exactly. They're either neutral or not. But to say, we will support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, with the support of our moderate friends who will guide what we're going to do, and the first thing they're going to say is what? This has nothing to do with Islam. Right? We're going to keep going on. So I just like to point that out, that this has been going on since then, and I just like to point out that there's a duty for professionals in law. If you are a professional, this is Rule 1.1, you have a duty to be competent, that is the duty to know. And I'm not going to go through here too much because I want to get to the slides. We're not going to talk about the OIC, but I just want you to understand the OIC works its way through international organizations, and they're the ones that passed 1618. And here's the document that shows that UN Resolution 1618 was passed. Pakistan, on behalf of the Organization Islamic Conference, draft resolution. Notes by the speech by the General Secretary of the OIC, Ekmeldin Asanoglu, that 1618 in the UN, which is stated in facially neutral language, is actually the OIC's 10-year program of action to make defamation of Islam a crime in every jurisdiction, which is why you see people getting fired today in America, right? So it's not something that's going to happen anymore. So I just like to point that out. And the other thing I like to point out is to understand the strategy to take America down, you also have to understand that there is an actual alliance between the Brotherhood in America and the hard left. Okay? There's a real alliance. And we're not going to go into that because we're just going to focus on the Ikhwan. Who is the Ikhwan? The Muslim Brotherhood. Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood. So, and I'm going to zip through here because I think you're all familiar with the explanatory memorandum, right? All I want to point out is that the explanatory memorandum was discovered in a search by the FBI of a Muslim Brotherhood leader's house, in which they found this document, the explanatory memorandum, which in fact was translated and used as evidence that led to conviction of the largest funding terrorism case in history, the Holy Land Foundation case, which happened here in Texas. Okay? And they said that they are the Islamic movement controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood. They're documents. That's why you're seeing a whole lot of effort to try to tell you that this is not what it purports to be. They say that the role of the Muslim Brotherhood of North America is a civilization jihad to destroy America from within. Right? So, let me just show you this. Here's the Muslim Brotherhood's glyph, and on the bottom you see that Arabic. You know what that says? It's in English, it's against them, make ready. Boom. It comes from Quran verse 860. Against them make ready your strength to the utmost of your power, including steeds of war, to strike terror into the hearts of the enemies of Allah and your enemies and others besides whom you do not know, but whom Allah doth know. That sounds an awful lot like kill them all, let God sort them out, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Okay, so that is the model there. Jihad, their mission, they say they forswear violence because they see themselves as being in the da'wah stage, the preparation stage, the preparation for jihad. Against them make ready your strength to the utmost of the war. But you know, their narrative is converging with Al-Qaeda. It's actually converged. We can go farther on this, but we're not going to brief it today, so I'll leave it here. In that explanatory memorandum, they basically talk about the fact that they have to work with the observant Muslim base. And what is the base? What's the Arabic term for the base? Al-Qaeda. That's what it means. So, we're going to come up on a slide here. I have to apologize because sometimes it just doesn't come out right. But let's take a look at that quote again. Against them make ready your strength to the utmost of your power, including steeds of war. It's not the projector. It says it was published by the Brotherhood, by the group with real dark on dark. And that's right there you see this says, and prepare against them to the utmost of your power. That's just a different translation of 860, right? You see that? Well, I got that out of this book right here. And what does it say? It says it's the Low Mujahid pocketbook. When did it come out? It came out 3 weeks before the Boston Marathon bombing. Okay? And what is it? It was a special edition of Inspire magazine. Now, again, it says Inspire up at the top, but it's the way they... This is a hard image to capture because it's white on white, right next to black on black, you know. But it says Inspire magazine. Who publishes Inspire magazine? Al-Qaeda. That's their magazine in English. So here you have 3 weeks before the Boston bombing, the Lone Mujahid pocketbook as a commemorative edition of Inspire magazine comes out. What is one of the things they teach? How to build a pressure cooker bomb. But you see, just like the Brotherhood says against them make ready, so does Al-Qaeda. You see they're pegging themselves on the same Quranic basis. I could go on, we don't have slides for this. And of course, everybody noted how both seem to be affiliated with the Islamic Society of Boston. So they were all found guilty. Guilty. And among the things on the explanatory memorandum were the members. There's ISNA, the Muslim Student Association, the Thief Council of North America, CARE, back then it was called the Islamic Association for Palestine, the Islamic Circle of North America, and the bottom one, the IIIT, the International Institute of Islamic Thought. We're going to move on there, but before I do, I want to show you how pervasive this is. People remember San Bernardino? Okay, I want to say that this is an unnatural event that nobody seems to want to pick up on. Because before the police could give their story, CARE was allowed to give press conference to frame what happened at San Bernardino. They actually had access to the family and actually brought up and had press conferences. A day or two later, when the head of the FBI came up and gave his press report and said, clearly this is terrorism, we want you to report suspicious activity, he got in trouble. Does anybody know that? Then like within a couple hours, he came up to give a second press conference with the Attorney General standing right next to him. Right next to him. And as soon as he finished his prepared statement, they went to questions, and the AG said, no questions, cut off the mic. Did that to the director of the FBI. How many people remember this? How many people saw this? It was on TV. Okay? So, I just want to make it really clear that the Brotherhood was allowed to frame the events of San Bernardino. But I'm not just stopping here. Because the mother was a member of ICNA. But here you see this? This was on C-SPAN. Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, was at a Muslim event where she talked about going after Americans for things that could be perceived to be violent. Okay? Now, what I'd like to point out, this is Farhana Kara. She's the head of Muslim Advocates. She was made to testify before the Senate a couple years back because she basically told Muslims not to talk to law enforcement. And she was asked about that by Senator Kyle. Now, not to talk to law enforcement because they might be under suspicion of terror, they might be under government suspicion. She was telling Muslims, as the head of Muslim Advocates, never to go to the FBI if they had any suspicious activity. Okay? But there's the Muslim Advocates logo, there's the dais she's giving her speech on, and what does it say underneath? Promoting what? Promoting? Promoting freedom and justice for all. That's almost like liberty and justice. How many people see this, what this is? Raise your hands. Very few people see this. Well, you're going to see it in a second. Freedom and justice. This is the Muslim Brotherhood's official webpage. I'm telling you, I was briefing some senior people in the Pentagon with multiple stars on their shoulder. And I said, sir, I want to brief you this. And they said, well, where'd you get this? I said, I got this from Ikhwan Web. Well, what's Ikhwan Web? I said, it's the Muslim Brotherhood's official English language webpage. And you can see right up there, Ikhwan Web, promoting Brotherhood's official English language website. And they said, Steve, are you here to tell me that Ikhwan Web, the Muslim Brotherhood's official English language website? I said, yes, sir. How do you know? Sir, it says right here, Ikhwan Web, the official English. Wow! So I, being the intelligence officer, was also an attorney, say, that's a data point. The Brotherhood publishes everything they do. And our senior leaders don't even know that, go do a Google search on it. Does anybody see the language of that? English. So what did they say? The Muslim Brotherhood establishes the formation of a political party, the Freedom and Justice Party. Freedom and justice is a Muslim Brotherhood term. And when you parse it out the way the Brotherhood parses it out, it's freedom from the laws of man, justice according to Sharia law. But don't take my word for this. You could go into the book The Milestones, the book written by Said Qutb that lays down the Brotherhood strategy. I give you quote after quote. And we're not going to go into it here because we're short on time. Do we have some time? Are we good for time? Huh? 10 minutes. Yikes. So, but you can see here all the discussion about what freedom and justice means to the Muslim world. And why am I showing you this? Because when we go back and you see that the Attorney General basically said on a Muslim Brotherhood dais at the time of San Bernardino that she committed to a Muslim Brotherhood entity that the background says promoting freedom and justice for all, meaning promoting the implementation of Sharia for all, okay, that she would use the full force of the Justice Department to go after people who say things that are derogatory to Islam. There it is. Loretta Lynch vows to persecute those who use anti-Muslim speech that edges toward violence. Wow. edges. That could mean anything you want it to mean if you want to prosecute somebody. This is staggering. There is a whole line of constitutional law called restraint. It's called prior restraint. Unconstitutional speech, you can have something called unconstitutional because you create prior restraint. You keep somebody from saying something for fear of repercussions. This is the Justice Department doing something that's a staggering attack. You know, when I wrote my book, we had to take the word staggering out the 500 times I used it. Because it's like, it's staggering to a organization that is committed to the destruction of America through civilization jihad, no less. So, you know, why won't the chairman, this is McCall, he's one of your guys down here in Texas, do the terror bill? Well, maybe because he thinks that CARE is our greatest ally in the war on terror. You see that? Here you have Peter King asking CARE, why are you telling people to build the wall of resistance and not to talk to the FBI? And they did it like they did with the interfaith movement in testimony. Now, would you say CARE when they say to Muslims, don't talk to the FBI? That's pretty clear. Right? Pretty clear. Now, if CARE, being a part of the Brotherhood, subordinated to the Thief Council of North America that publishes Islamic law, says certain things can bring death on you, and you know they're the Brotherhood, do you think when they're suggesting not to talk to the FBI that they're just suggesting it? Of course not. So, do you think, when this was asked to CARE, their answer was, just like with the interfaith movement, well, you know, it's really complicated. It's so complicated. Well, you know, it's like this. For you, a Westerner, when you read that, we understand that you see this to be a threat not to talk to these people. But if you understood how complicated and nuanced it was, you'd understand the way he did, and it doesn't really say that. And just like with the interfaith crowd, you know what we saw? All the people, all the members of Congress, they're going, thank God we don't have to act on this one. This is literally a state, how do you put this? A non-state entity standing up, establishing jurisdiction that tells their members or their imputed members that they can't talk to the lawful government. And now here you have Jay Johnson saying that he was going to go to the Al-Dals Area Muslim Center run by Imam Majid. Imam Majid is the head of ISNA, Islamic Society in North America, the lead Muslim Brotherhood front group, an indicted co-conspirator of that foundation trial. Not him, but the organization. Okay? So here you have San Bernardino. You have San Bernardino, and you have the Attorney General and the head of DHS associating with Brotherhood entities where CARE was allowed to set the narrative, where after you had the Attorney General stand next to the head of the FBI on that second briefing, and they you immediately went to a second interview by the attorneys of the family and said exactly what CARE said the day before. So this was an overt, I would like to say attempt, but it was more than an attempt, it succeeded. Where not only the media allowed them to do it, but our senior counter-terror people showed up to their events. Now, if you saw someone attack and kill people in a synagogue, wouldn't you expect that your political leaders would go to their memorials at their synagogue to talk about it? But that didn't happen. Congress went to the Al-Dals area. This was a discussion to talk there. This is just strange. Why? Because they were more concerned about there being repercussions to them than they were about the people who were killed. So here you have Ramadan, he was in Dallas a couple years ago. This is a little old. We should be very careful not to be colonized by something which is coming from this consumer society. It should be us with our understanding of Islam, our principles colonizing positively the United States of America. That was here in Texas. Steve, you know, that could mean something else, but I don't think so. So, What version of Islamic law do I use? Well, we already talked about this. Here, you have, remember that book I showed you? This one? And why am I going over this again? I haven't written a little vignette. Because Al-Wadi was a senior member of the Brotherhood of America, as evidenced by the fact he was president of the IIIT and the Fiqh Council of North America, while he was also a member of the Fiqh Academy at Jeddah, and was allowed to sign a signature block that way, associating what he was doing with what? The Brotherhood domestically. So you have that tie-in right there, the Brotherhood relationship. But you know what? The Fiqh Council at Jeddah is also a subordinate element of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Okay? And they are the same people who basically said this is good Islamic law. Can you see that if they're publishing books in English for American Muslims to read that are so simple that they will pick up a gun the next day and shoot you, that they might want to pretend that you can't understand that same thing because it's complicated, and because anybody who's got a 6th grade reading capability will understand exactly what it says and say, law enforcement, FBI, you need to stop this. You need to stop it right now. Okay? Can you see that? That this is so clear. The only way they can keep you from understanding it is to criminalize it. You're reading. No, you can read it, but we'll put you in jail for saying anything about it. Does that not conform with black letter Islamic law? Absolutely. So here we have the other one. It's Egypt, and Egypt approved a book from Al-Azhar. Why do you think I want you to see that Al-Azhar approved it for Egypt? Because Al-Azhar is the most prestigious and most eminent and preeminent center for Islamic thinking in the world. It would be the Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, Sorbonne, Oxford, times into 1 times 2. So this is a validating certificate for these books of Islamic law. We certify the above-mentioned translation corresponds to the Arabic which conforms to the practice of faith of the Orthodox Sunni community. There is no objection to printing or circulating it. Remember I told you we went on the facts? This is a fact. And in any professional discussion, let me say it like a lawyer, if I come in and argue based on a book that we can show has all the authorities that says that this is what Islamic law says, I'm still not going to go in and say this is what all Muslims believe. I'm just going to make the simple point that all the organizations that signed off on it believe this, and we can hold them accountable. I'm not going to say all Muslims lie. I don't know that. I'm not going to say every Muslim I've worked with who belongs to the Brotherhood lie. I don't know that. What I do know is they have signed off on a book that says they're required to lie, and that means from that point on, I am not allowed as a professional analyst or a lawyer, right, to pretend it doesn't say that, and to pretend that the people I'm up against aren't beholden to that rule. How do people think that our interfaith community is on their, we won't say, it's a church, on their you-know-what? But don't you see that the Brotherhood to penetrate the interfaith movement had to already recognize that they were broken? So, here we have it, subsidiary organization of the OIC, the International Fiqh Academy, which is in Jeddah. So, we already did that. So, we did that. And I think I want to really kind of show, so here we have a document like this, War and Peace and the Law of Islam, it's published by, see the bottom? It says, the International Institute of Islamic Thought. So we know that they buy off on this book. And we know that the Brotherhood says jihad means to wage war against non-Muslims. And we know that these entities signed off on a document, the explanatory memorandum, that says that they're here to have a grand jihad to destroy America. Do you know, this is a prosecutor's dream if this was organized crime. You have their statements that each one of them has already met an evidentiary standard. Let me show you again. I like this little quote at the top, as opposed to a political position on the taking of power. How many people think that it's outrage that this is our political leaders, in the name of being politically correct, would say that's protected speech? Because I will say, if you're not analyzing that, I don't know what you're doing. But you're not supporting and defending the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's what you're not doing. And Americans are being killed. In America. And remember I told you about the Al-Qaeda book, Al-Qaeda 2.0, written in year 2002? Remember I told you that? And they said 8 years from then, in 2008, they would bring down the Arab states. And they said in 2013, they would stand up the Islamic State and the Caliphate? Do you know what they said was going to happen in 2016? All-out war. Did anybody see the statement coming out from the article about Black Lives Matter where they were publishing their stuff in Arabic? Has anybody caught how much the Brotherhood works with that organization? Does anybody think that what you saw a couple years ago in Ferguson isn't supposed to kind of like all over? Maybe this summer in a political election? I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying for an analyst they would put flags up there. They'd have a whole lot of flags up there. So that's a political statement. So let's see. Our national, this is the official joint staff publication of what our doctrines are. Insurgency, the organized use of subversion and violence by a group or movement that seeks to overthrow or force change of a governing authority. I think that a government that says they want to use force to overthrow by subversion through jihad, that constitutes insurgency under our official joint staff definition, doesn't it? Especially if they say the ICWA must understand that their work in America is a grand jihad, eliminating, destroying it from within. Especially when that same entity defines jihad as warfare against non-Muslims. It also violates the U.S. Criminal Code. No matter where you start in this whole thing, what you need to know is there's nothing that needs to be researched any longer to identify these people as declared people who swore to subvert the economy, the country, that not only fulfills our insurgency definitions in warfare, it trips the U.S. Code, Title 18. So I think we're going to end right here because we're just running out of time. But I just kind of like to show people that this stuff is very real. And what we'll do is we'll just open up the questions. Thank you very much.
Let me get the question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple of...
Just questions,
Okay.
not commentary.
Oh, okay. Do you, in your opinion, think that this is a form of intimidation, blindness, and deafness towards the American people by the Islamic movement, by the Brotherhood, by the Jihadists, by ISIS?
Do I think it's a form of intimidation? Well, you know, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton on July 15, 2011 met with the head of the OIC, Ekmeladin Isinoglu, in Turkey to commit with the State Department, and she would commit the State Department's full efforts to engage in peer pressure and shaming against you. If you should happen to run scans, just like Attorney General recently said in a different way, peer pressure and shaming. That sounds to me like not only, I think ISIS, they're not into intimidation. The intimidation of the Brotherhood is, well, if you don't do what we tell you peacefully, we're going to have them. If you don't give me the money, Guido's going to come break your legs. Oh, I didn't break your legs. So I do think that, yes, it's intimidation. I think when you see the Attorney General engage in a staggeringly unconstitutional promise to the Muslim Brotherhood to prosecute people, that it's not just those organizations anymore. And I want to make something very clear. You see nothing of the Republican Party stopping this. And you have no reason to believe they will.
It's always better to have a non-Muslim criticize non-Muslims about their positions on Islam than to have the Muslims. Yes, sir. Go ahead. There's Mike.
Do you see anyone at any level of our government taking steps to put a stop to this?
Next question. The current head of the FBI, and I'm just trying to remember his name. Comey. I do think he does see this. I have heard, I'm not going to get specific, whether it's this or stuff having to do with the Secretary Clinton putting classified information on private servers, that they have special agents who are in fear of their lives on some of this stuff. And so, yeah, I think Comey does. I think a lot of people at the grassroots level get this, and they've gone to ground. But I think at the top level, and I think it's bipartisan, you have an absolute consensus.
Would you want to reference the bill that's in Congress right now, talking about outlawing them? Isn't that one evidence that somebody is getting it? Because
Right now, there is a bill before Congress, both in the Senate and the House, to declare the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization.
Without considering it a hate crime.
Pardon?
Without considering it a hate crime.
Well, actually, the people who are fighting it say that is hate crime. Because
Hate crime?
they would say it's a hate crime to try to declare them a terrorist organization. Yes. But I think more importantly,
They just use hate crime as an umbrella for anything.
that's exactly right.
it's to shut down the speech.
You're a hate crime today. You're a hate crime. Whether it is or isn't.
By the way, the hate crime narrative doesn't come from the Islamic world, it comes from the hard left. What you see with the overall Brotherhood strategy is can you hold this for a second? Back in the 1980s, the Brotherhood looked at what their strategy would be, and they saw that the hard left was going to take down America on narratives. The narratives was racism, sexism, homophobia, okay? And they would use that to intimidate. So what you call political correctness is actually an enforcement mechanism, because only certain classes of people get attacked for those things, okay? They created the word Islamophobia. People say the word existed before that. But that word was tailored and injected into that discussion in the late 80s by the IIIT, and we do have testimony on that, okay? So that they could get the left to completely adopt most of the Brotherhood, most of the Islamic strategy, the Brotherhood strategy, by just riding on the multicultural narrative. That you would be racism, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia. And so they basically co-opted, the goal was to first co-opt the left narrative and then to take it over. And you're starting to see right now that that narrative is. But this raises a point, and it's a different brief and it's not this brief. You have to understand that the Brotherhood strategy is to ride on the crest of the hard left, and then once the Republic collapses, they'll duke it out. And you can make it, you can get good arguments, we'll win that one. I'm not saying it's going to happen, I'm just saying that's the strategy. And right now, it's a winning strategy.
Two more questions.
Yes.
You made a statement, the hierarchical intelligence community something, and you didn't finish the statement, so I was curious what it was.
My answer will be, did I say that?
Yeah.
The answer will be, the people who are on the ground, whether they're in Iraq, whether they're in Afghanistan, or whether they're special agents, they're seeing it. When I was still doing the Joint Forces Staff College, early on, I first started giving those briefs. I was ordered to give them to all in the class. It routinely happened that the Joint Forces Staff College is lieutenant colonels and colonels, okay, and that they're going to take joint staff positions, so they have to have this training to do that. And I would give the briefing, and we would have them coming back from commands. If they were Marines, they were coming back from regimental command. If they were Army, they were coming back from brigade command. And on the break, they would come up to me, because it was like a 6-hour brief. And they'd go up to me, and they were just so angry. And I thought, holy cow, these guys are really angry. What did I say? And it was like this happened like 3 times, like in 1 year. And this is when the fighting was really somewhat intense over there. They would go. They were shaking mad. Why did I just know this now? Why did I just find this out? I have 5 people I know right now who would be alive had I known that before I deployed. And why? Because if you hear this brief, this brief is kind of skimming on the Brotherhood. The ones I give inside, I think you've seen, Dwight, parts of them, where I go into what their doctrine is, abrogation, Ijma, and how it puts steel on target for them. And you were there, it instantly clicks. They then remember what these guys were telling them, that they're cultural experts, that they don't mean anything, they don't know what they're talking about. It instantly clicks.
Last question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, give you, and then we'll get one more.
I just wanted to know, do you see any presidential candidates that are aware of this or sympathetic to what's going on?
I'll say there are 3 candidates who seem to get this. I don't want to say more than I should because, you know, but I think Carson got it. I think Cruz gets it. And I think Trump gets it. But Trump gets it in a way that I'm just not quite sure of. But I don't want to say anything derogatory, because I don't mean to say anything derogatory. I think he gets it because I think of the 3, you know, Trump gets it, and I think Carson falls in this area too. I'm not trying to say they're the same. That they get it because, what the heck, what's going on here? And I think that their response to it is just a little bit different than professional politicians because they're seeing it. And they're not having to be abused by this. If we were not in a church, I would use the B language. You know, it's the way they talk about it is a lie. What I would tell people is, to know this war, you have to know it's being fought on a narrative. And we didn't get to the CVE. They'll say this combating violent extremism narrative is one that is our counter-terror strategy. And I don't agree. And I have the creds because I was warning against this going way far back. Okay? The CVE overwrites the actual counter-terror legislation. So whereas the FBI's mission is to combat terrorism, they were convinced that what their mission was outreach. Statutory requirement to combat terrorism, a decision bureaucratically to do outreach, which is, there's no statutory basis to it. And what's scary is the CVE is being implemented by the Brotherhood domestically and international organizations. This is why you have to read my book, because this is what they're moving slow. They're moving multi-axially from many different directions, so that their goal is to not make you aware that everything you thought 10 years ago, you think the opposite of now, and you don't even know you completely flipped. Okay?
Last question. Yes, sir.
Did I answer your question?
Given the way things are going, nothing changes radically. How much time do you think this country has before it collapses? Worst case. This is great.
Not much. About 20 minutes?
That's hard to say. I mean, I think what could be said is that I think events are going to happen at some point where America as we knew it will be gone, even if we later pick up the pieces and put it back together again. And, you know, I don't want to get into any confidences and stuff like that, but when I do these briefings in larger audience, more, you know, in a church, if I have someone tell me about what Obama did, I'll say, well, that's great, but I want to tell you what Bush did. And they'll say, why does Obama work with the Brotherhood? And I'll say, well, why did Bush bring them in? Because what I like people to understand is, ideologically, politically, they kind of align with the left. But the business deal, the oil money, the Sharia-compliant finance stuff, that's all about, you know, money. And I think that when you do political warfare, which is national warfare, which is strategic warfare, okay, you come up with 5 lines of operation. There's the political, there's the violent, there's the non-violent, there's the informational, and there's the, I can't remember. The only thing our DOD does anymore is the violent, the war fighting. We no longer have a capacity in our national defense to do national level national security. We don't do strategy. We have General Pace in 2005 saying we have yet to have a strategy. We have Chairman Myers, who was the chairman of Joint Chiefs, says that we never had a strategy. We have General Nagata of Special Operations Command about a year ago saying we not only don't have a strategy, we don't even know who the enemy is. And we, of course, we had President Obama say, everybody attacked President Obama for saying that. Well, my thesis that came out in 2007 was saying we didn't have a strategy then, and the generals were saying it. So I want to say for people who, I have a 516, I'm not going to be political, so that could be one reason why I'm telling you this. But the other reason why I'm telling you this is, I started getting in trouble on this under the Bush administration. And it was Chertoff who brought in Brotherhood people to write the words that worked to sanitize the language for our national security, that took it out of the FBI's contract lexicon before Obama ever came along. And just like it's worse under Obama, when you have a curve that goes like this, it just means to progress further along. Why am I saying this? Am I telling you this so you should hate Bush or hate Obama or like them or have your own? No, I'm saying this because whatever is going on, the other side has it covered. They have all the bases covered, okay? And you have to fight your war, defending your worldview on your own terrain.
Well, what kind of preparation do we need?
Well, I was going to just go into that.
You need, first of all, because it's an ACT group, and I used to say this a lot more than I do now, you need to stop being emotional, and you need to start being factual. You can't lose on the facts. They don't want you to talk about the facts, okay? They want you to talk about, they want you to come undone. They want you to go to a meeting, tequila, tequila, tequila. I wish I had never breathed tequila, because it's like something people glom onto. You know what I'm saying? That you have to know the enemy. Let me go like this. To play chess in second grade with another second grader, you had to have a certain level of sophistication to beat him. But if you think that second grader can go up against a chess master and beat him, you're crazy. That they're operating at a level of thinking that is now above the level of thinking of most Americans today.
Exactly.
Okay? Diana West wrote a book called The Death of the Grown-Up. I always like this book because it's an easy read. And she makes the point that from 1947 to now, in 1947, you could go up to a teenager and say, what do you want to do when you grow up? It would be, I want to be X or Y like my mom or dad. Today, if you go up to an adult parent of a teenager and say, what do you want to do? They'll say, I want to be cool like their kids. That there's something that's happened in this country where you have the infantilization of thinking. That you actually, if you're in your 20s, you actually are not as smart as your parents, who may not be as smart as their grandparents. Really. And you are not thinking at the level at which you have to, because the education system has destroyed the capacity to reason. So what do you have to do? You have to make a decision to know. Sorry.
Those are the kind of ACT things that we focus on, whether it's education by bringing in folks like Stephen, whether we talk about supporting the bills that declare the Muslim Brotherhood who they are, whether we end up having these resolutions, we move the ball down the court bit by bit.